back to our next Respect Project talk. Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Here we are. We are about to celebrate an exciting launch of a new movie on Lifetime coming out October 16th called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And today we are going to talk about not sweating the small stuff, moving through the big stuff and living with a very big, wide, heartbroken open to live more fully and become self-discoverers through loss. We have 5 warrior women who are here with us today. I'd like to start with KRISTINE CARLSON, who the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff movie is inspired by the true events around your life. You're the co-creator of the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff series, as well as the author of Heartbroken Open, which I cannot wait to talk to you about. And I feel like if there was a motto for my life, it would be Heartbroken Open. And I'm like leading with that. EVA LARUE is an Emmy Award-winning actress, a great philanthropist, activist out there doing huge things in the world, and a co-host often on the Respect Project. Dorothy Toran is a producer. She is the co-founder of Lauren Grace Media. She has huge hits on Bravo, such as The Housewives and really important programming. We have a project coming out in 2022 that I'm excited about called the Untitled Injustice program about racial injustice in the United States that we hope you guys will be a part of with us. Dianne Gray is a grief and end-of-life care expert and also on the board of directors of the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation. And Scarlett Lewis, dear friend, she is the founder of the Choose Love movement. She's the author of Nurturing Healing Love. And also in 2022, we'll be having a movie made at Lifetime about her life and the events around losing her son at the Sandy Hook massacre. So these are some pretty heavy topics, but I invite you into this conversation because the spirit of it is to live with a heartbroken open so that we can live more fully. And I've never met a group of warriors more beautiful than you 5. So just to start, KRISTINE, first of all, congratulations. This Lifetime movie is exciting. Everybody write it down in your calendar, October 16th for Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. But I wanted to start with asking you about Heartbroken Open, your inspiration for the title, your inspiration for the content of that book, because I really think at the core of this conversation on this Monday morning, that's really what you all do with such expertise.
Well, thanks, Liz, so much. And it's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for hosting this beautiful event. So I, like almost everyone, goes through loss in our lifetime. We all will. And I went through sudden loss when Richard Carlson, the author of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, my husband of 25 years, in his mid-40s, got on a plane and had a pulmonary embolism on the descent of that flight. So, you know, it was what we call sudden loss, very sudden. You know, you're just going about living your life and then bam, you know, like out of just nowhere. We had 2 daughters in high school. One was 14, one was 17 at the time. It was such a shock. So we were kind of at the pinnacle of what you would say success at the time. And where the term Heartbroken Open came from was I hadn't realized that through all the success that we'd had, how more numb to life I had gotten in my own role as being a wife and a mother. And even before Richard died, I was starting to feel like called to do something more with my own life because I had been holding space for him. Some people would say living in his shadow. I didn't really think of it that way because he was always like dragging me up to the front, like, come on, write with me, do this. What's going on why are you staying back there? But I really was like the crystal in my family's clock. You know, I felt like he had such a full career and my job was to hold space for him and that was my contribution to the world. And so when he died, I began to journal to fill up those early morning hours where we would sit and have coffee together and really strategize about our daughters, raising them, and strategize about life and come up with chapter titles. You know, he was a very prolific writer in his lifetime. He wrote 30 books. So I was journaling myself where I felt like I could connect with him. And I remember one particular day where I was just crying and crying. And I remember writing, oh my God, I've been heartbroken open to feeling my life. And I had never really realized what a wall I had allowed to grow around my heart until it was completely shattered. And I often say now that in that shattering, the beautiful part of that is that the ego and those parts of yourself that you are hiding under completely go away, and your identity crisis happens. And in that crisis, you actually get to feel who you really are. All the beautiful parts and the ugly parts, the insecurities and the fears and all of that. Especially after a very long relationship, it's like, as women and men in a marriage that goes from, we're 18 on up for 25 years, you kind of defer things to each other, and sort of aspects of my personality that may have been hidden behind aspects of his were suddenly just broken open too. And so in a way, that's where the self-discovery piece comes from. So I'm sorry, I'm going to be quiet now.
No, I find, no. You're amazing. First of all, I'm a huge fan. I'm so excited about the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff movie, but also the movement behind everything you're saying, because I lost and for those of you who are with us, thank you for being with us. This is not a conversation just about death and dying. This is a conversation about living more fully. But I do think when you've had your heart broken open, which really all of us have, it's just that for some of you who are here, you've experienced such traumatic loss, as opposed to what we all go through, which is just, the run-of-the-mill suffering that you get to have in this lifetime. But we become changed by it, or we become changed by it regardless. But if we become changed by it for good, it defines our art of living. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. Elisabeth Kubler-Ross said, the reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to be the same. And I would propose that whether you've lost a husband or a child, or, recently Eva's been through a lot of loss, Dorothy's lost her sister, whether I've lost my mother, whether you have experienced loss and death and dying, there is you're rebuilt through loss in general. If you allow yourself to be, if you find an opening where tragedy exists. And I love this quote that says, the cracks are where the light comes in. And I would venture to guess that every one of us has become deeper, better, stronger, more wise through our tragedies. And I invite everybody to look at life like that. Dorothy, one of the things I think about is, we do suffer in silence a lot. And generally speaking, I mean, much of why we created the Respect Project is just conversation, healthy, honest, deep conversation that is based in respect. But it's hard to talk about grief. I mean, do you feel comfortable being able to communicate about the grief around your sister or anything else that you're going through? Because most of the time people are very uncomfortable to lead with that, but that is one of our great connectors.
Mm-hmm. Totally, you're absolutely right. And I would say I am comfortable talking about my grief because I'm a communicator. It's just like it's my lifestyle. And if I wasn't able to communicate how I felt, which helps me connect to women just like you and so many other people that have also experienced traumatic loss, I think that would kill me, honestly. Like, I think it's so important to connect. My baby sister died in 2016. I say suddenly, of lupus, a week before she was scheduled for a kidney transplant that she was getting from her husband, and they were newlyweds. So my sister had lupus most of her life. She manifested symptoms of autoimmune disease when she was 2 years old. She wasn't diagnosed with lupus until she was 16. And then by the time she was 27, she was in kidney failure, on dialysis for 7 years, and died at 33. And interestingly enough, the night before she died, we had plans for coffee at Starbucks the following afternoon. And so, even though my sister had been sick for so many of those years, if you have family members or suffer from chronic illness, you know that that is, it is just like a daily battle that lasts a really long time. It was sudden in that, like, I was like, yes, we're having coffee tomorrow. And then we weren't. And she went into cardiac arrest, and she was in a coma for 7 days and died 7 days later. Just as a side note, Diane, I have so much respect for the work that you do in hospice and palliative care. I never knew what palliative care was at all. I'd never heard of it at all, which I'm sure you hear all the time. And the palliative care team, it was such a gift to have them take care of my sister and my family at that time, because what the work that you do is really magical and really critically important. So I just had to say that when I realized the kind of work that you do. And I would say that, you know, what has gotten me, and, you know, grief, we all know is not linear, right? Like, it hits you at different times in different ways. The day my sister died, a really dear friend of mine called me, and she said, I know you won't remember this now, but I hope that you'll remember it at some point on this journey. And she said, death kills the body. It does not kill the relationship. And that is what saved me. Like, if someone said, like, what's the one thing that has, like, gotten you to that point, like, Christine, like, you know, Scarlett, you're nodding your head, like, it really was like, that's when my heartbreak opened up, because I understood that so deeply. And I have found ways to connect with Wede, my sister, in a lot of ways that I would have never even dared to think about before hearing. So that for me was, it was game changing in that, you know, for me.
I think that's really hits on something that I was thinking about all weekend in preparation of talking to you guys, which is I would do anything to have my mom back.
Yeah,
but I never would be the woman I am today if my mom had lived, if I didn't have to parent my child without a mother, you know, grandmother present, so on and so forth. Back to you guys, but not sweating the small stuff is really an art form. You know, it takes diligence. It's a muscular commitment you make to yourself every day. But how do you not sweat the big stuff? You know, how do you move through that? How do you exercise that philosophy? Eva, you're you had a rough year, girl, but you've been through a lot, and I think you've really mastered. You're much like all of you, always sort of projecting light. With Dorothy, I love working with you so much, and you always uplift me with your beautiful smile. And I understand when we have had our Heartbroken Open, we want to lead with that love, and ultimately we want to inspire others to learn the skill of how to do that, because it's really the art of life. Eva.
Oh my. Have you got a minute?
Pull up a chair, girl.
Pull up a chair. Pour yourself a margarita. So in the last year and a half, while we've all been through all this madness, the world's been through this madness together. For me, it was a backdrop to my dad passing, and then 6 months later, my ex-husband, who was still my dear friend, and my daughter's father, he suddenly died. And then 6 months after that, my beloved mother-in-law died. And that, with my daughter graduating from high school and a stalker that I had for 12 years, finding out what school my daughter went to and starting to call my daughter's school and threaten her life. And after 12 years of not being caught, thank God the FBI finally caught him, and now he's awaiting trial. That was 2 years ago. But so this was all like happening at one time. It was all this fear about this, you know, stalker, and all of this grief, and it was just rolling one after the next. And then my daughter going into such a deep spiral depression. I thought I might lose her at that point too, because she was in such a deep spiral depression when her dad died. And so I rumbled. I literally, like, you know, was fighting with the saying that this is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And I was like, okay, but it feels like a punishment. So how is it happening for me? Because in the moment, it all just feels like a massive punishment, and what did I do? I don't think you can help but go into that little despairing, ante of, that you can't, you have such a hard time pulling out of. But then when you get the little glimpses of, like you with your Heartbroken Open, and you start to actually reconnect with those orphaned pieces of yourself, those those pieces of yourself that you have shoved off to the side, or those huge pieces of regret, and those huge pieces of guilt or shame, or what I should have done and what I shouldn't have done, what I should have said and what I didn't get to say, and all those things. And you start to really forgive yourself for the first time, and you really incorporate those orphaned parts of yourself again, and give yourself permission to let it just be messy. And we're just dancing with those shadows, that shadow self, in a very real way, and there's no way around it. And so I think as you start to realize that you have to move through it, and that it's going to be a daily visitor, and then there starts to almost be some weird comfort with the pain, you know what I mean? Like that you're waking up and there it is again. Hey, I know you. I know you're not going anywhere anytime soon. And because I think the real struggle is when you are so frustrated that you're not over it yet.
Right.
And then you're constantly frustrating constantly. I think it's not going anywhere. So what parts of myself do I need to just love the bejesus out of, and forgive, and let it be okay that I feel regret and shame and remorse, and and that I'm not parenting at my best either right now. And she's blaming all of it on me. We just went through my daughter and I mean, just the worst ever when her dad died. She completely took out her rage on me, and I just didn't know how to parent at all during that. And only now have we come back stronger and better and all the things. But it was a full year of, I thought I'd just plain lose her.
Well, I mean, I know what that feels like because I've been going through a lot with my daughter as well. And I think what you said is, when you stop struggling, like arm wrestling, like mud wrestling with
you're like,
with all of the stuff that's happening to you, and you begin to dance with it a little bit. I think there's something about that. And I actually, and I thought what you said is really great, which is the only way out is through. So, this sort of avoiding of all of the difficulty, begins to just be a struggle that, it just doesn't make any sense in your life. So you have to move through it, and moving through it with grace is what each of you have done. And then you've gone out there and you've tried to help others move through it with grace. And Scarlett, I was going to ask you specifically, prior to Jessie, and I'd like you to talk about Jessie and the Choose Love movement and all of that. But prior to losing Jessie, do you feel that you danced with those difficulties in your life, and do you now? Can you embrace that in a different way? So just share with everybody your life's work, your purpose, what you've been working on through all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really important to understand that we all want to love and be loved, yet we all suffer, we all feel pain, we all grieve. And the interesting thing to me is that the skills and tools, coping skills, specifically relationship skills, the understanding that everything that happens to us is an opportunity for growth. We're not born with that knowledge. We have to learn it. And so when you face these difficulties, a lot of times, and I know I didn't have the skills and tools that I needed. Dianne Gray, who's on this call, she helped me so much, just figure things out with my surviving son, who was 12 years old at the time. And you know, that's one thing. That's what the Choose Love movement does, because I realized so many of what are called essential life skills we need to learn. And by the way, you can learn them as an adult. That's the good news, because I have, before in my previous life, I feel like I didn't have these skills and tools. So I did what a lot of people do. I mean, I had a lot of turmoil going on in my life, and I drank and to numb myself, and I fought back. Right. I met every situation. If my ex-husband was mad, I was madder, and all this. And, but I didn't know how to handle myself. And I feel like through realizing that what happened to my son, which was he was murdered in his first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School alongside 19 of his classmates and 6 educators, in one of the worst mass murders in US history, realizing that, wait a minute, that's preventable. We should be able to do that. And then really digging in on how we have addressed issues. I'm talking about issues, violence, substance abuse, mental illness, how we've been doing it wrong. We've been focusing on the problem and not focusing on proactive prevention. But I mean, I think I loved, Eva, when you said it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. I think that's something that we have to realize and then cultivate our courage, because science says courage is like a muscle. We can grow that and have that to face what's going on, because when something like this happens to us, we are out of control. We can't control everything that happens to us. I mean, we can't control the losses that we have, because we wouldn't have them if we could. We can't control this global pandemic. And so when you don't have skills and tools, then you're out of control. You're looking for somebody to blame, right? And you're finger pointing, fault finding. And then when you realize that doesn't work, you get angry. And that doesn't lead down a good path. That gives you a false sense of power, but really it's not. Really, you take your personal power back through thoughtful response. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to the world, and what I bring today to this conversation.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm actually very interested to have you and Christine sort of talk about what it was like, Christine, for you to make a movie about your life, and and to sort of relive some of this again, what that means for us as the audience to expect to see with Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, starring Heather Locklear, and all of that, and also what you're going through, Scarlett, and in the beginning process now of giving your life over to this sort of writing and creative process of making a movie. So I'd love for you, Christine, to talk about what that felt like for you.
Well, initially, I just worked very closely with Shannon Colery, who is the writer of the script. And we spent a lot of time, she'd get an idea and she'd, text me, what about this? Can you send me some examples? And she read my book, Heartbroken Open, which is what the movie is based on. I think honestly, it's harder for me to think about how my kids are going to process this, because they are so much an intricately woven part of my story. And I was really worried about that. I've tried to keep my kids out of the public eye as much as possible. And so they're older now. This is when they were 14 and 17. This is the year that the movie is done, around that time period. And they are now almost 30 and 32 years old. And my oldest daughter has 5 children. So, they on some level think it's pretty cool, but it's going to be pretty weird too. And I had to, when you take your life story and then you turn it into a movie, you have to realize, and you'll probably go through this too, Scarlett, that it's based on your story. So they really take, I'd say there's a very strong seed of our story throughout every story that's told in the movie, but it isn't exactly our story. It's very based on our story. So that was hard, it was hard. And it's, at first I was a little mad, I was like, how could you do this to my story? But then I had a friend who was an actor, and he read the script and he just talked me off the ledge, and he said, does it capture the essence of what you went through? And I said, yes, it does. Does it capture the essence of Richard? Yes, it does. Does it capture the messiness? Yes, it does. And then, to be honest, I had to really fight for the grieving part. I had to really fight, in a way to say, this needs to show more grief. I lost the love of my life. I didn't just bounce up and say, oh, goody, let's do life. It's like I went through tremendous grief. And so they did a really beautiful job. And what I love so much about Heather Locklear as an actress is she really took the time and the care to get to know me as a human being, and to get to feel me and feel my pain. And she came out to my house and spent a night with me, and it was really a really fun 24 hours. I mean, she was just like, oh my God, I'm having chills again. Oh my God, I'm having chills again. And, we cried and we laughed, and I just think she's just a really wonderful human, and also a profound professional. Like she really did the best that she could to add the depth to the character that I have, and she took that time. And Scarlett, I'm really excited for you, and yet it is, I will tell you, it's challenging. It's challenging because you want things to be as authentic as possible, and certainly everything I've ever done since my husband died has been 100% authentic. And I feel like that his death broke me open to who I really am. And there's no difference between the woman I'm showing you here on Zoom and the woman I am. There's just nothing, there's no difference. So, and that's been the great blessing of loss for me, is that I'm just who I am, and I don't apologize for that. And it's just the way it is, and I think that's been the great thing. And I love so much, Eva, what you said about that these things happen for us. I definitely think that we vacillate early on in our loss around that, where we want, we're sort of victimized by our loss initially, and then we have to really choose that this loss is going to open us to something greater, and we have to choose to be the hero of our own journey, and to realize that all of life happens for us, and that it's all there to teach us so much. And that's the beauty of what it means to be human and alive, is that we get to feel sorrow, and we get to feel tremendous joy. And that is at the essence of what it means to be alive.
I want to turn to, thank you for sharing that. I feel like you guys are going to need to exchange information at the end of this talk. Dianne, there are many things that have been mentioned that I would really love, I know you will, sort of weave them together, because when my mom passed away, I didn't read a lot of books about grief and suffering, but finally, when I was ready to process it from that more intellectual standpoint, I was flattened out by this concept that every day we're preparing for our death. And that is a commitment that we make to ourselves to live more fully. And I just love this quote by Viktor Frankl: but there was no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. And so when I turn to you, I think so much about the palliative care and what everybody has said, Dorothy and Eva, about you, and obviously Scarlett, knowing you so personally, as well as she's, gone through the loss of Jesse. How does one prepare for death? And do you feel that is ultimately what our life's work is? And it takes tremendous courage, but everything that Christine just said, wanting to lean into the grief and not be ashamed of it. I'd love for you to talk about what that feels like at the end of somebody's life, to help them with that process.
Happily, and thanks for having me today. I think so, like most of you, I too went through significant loss. A lot of people look through the fact that, yes, my son died, but I was also a 14-year caregiver. My son had a rare neurodegenerative disease. He was diagnosed at age 5, and at age, and he stopped walking at age 6, stopped moving his arms, then stopped moving his legs, then stopped swallowing from 9 through 14. So Dorothy, to your, to honor your sister too, it's the journey. I think that, to me, like many of you also said, that, you know, it's the suffering, right, is the part that we go, Eva, to your point, you know, it's one thing to hear, oh, okay, well, we're supposed to make meaning out of this, or we're supposed, but in the meantime, we're like, but I'm drowning. Are you listening? You know, I can't move. I think it's one thing to understand it conceptually, and it's quite another to walk through it. So I think though we can say the words and say, I'm supposed to do something with us, we're not often taught about how to get there. So I think the how to get there is the real aha. And to me, the real aha is to ask whether it's our higher power or our collective family, or go deep within ourselves and to say, okay, this certainly is not just about this moment. Please, someone help me, whether it's your God or your family or yourself. I need to sit with this to try to make some meaning out of this. I may not understand what that meaning is, that, okay, I get it. I heard this saying once that this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. Please, dear God, help me to find what that means. And because I can't stand. Not only can I not stand, I can't breathe. Not can I not breathe, I don't want to live. And I want to put that right out here right now on the table. Suffering invokes this feeling that I can't live through this. And if we're all honest, that is something that many people feel. It's what many people feel while they're working with me, doing their grief work or their caregiving work or their palliative care work. You know, Dorothy, your sister, didn't go through dialysis every day saying, this is happening for me. You know, it's just like, doesn't happen. But with that said, it's when we work through it. You know, everybody loves the butterfly, but not the process that it took to get there. The butterfly is so beautiful, but we forgot that it was in the chrysalis, that it went through, it had to flap its wings courageously and to exhaustion to break open and become that butterfly, to fly free. And that's what the work of Elisabeth Kubler-Ross is about, through suffering. The same with Viktor Frankl, who, by the way, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross and Viktor Frankl were friends.
Oh, wow.
You know, I have a beautiful picture of them sitting on the couch together. Viktor Frankl's wife, and Elisabeth. And they were friends, and they used to talk about logotherapy and finding meaning. And even the CDC did a fabulous research study, not to bore you to tears. So here's the Cliff Notes version. The CDC did a great study a few years ago, and it showed that happiness is short-lived and meaningfulness is very long-lasting. So if we would train ourselves and also to our children to find meaning in suffering, to find meaning in joy, what helps me to find meaning in life, what's the meaning of this situation? And even if we don't answer it right away, it's to keep looking. It's the quest, man's search for meaning. It was about Holocaust survivors. And to that point, I would offer up this. So none of us were there and alive at the actual Holocaust, but all of us in our own way internalize our own personal version of a Holocaust, the feeling of a personal just onslaught of depth of grief. Through that, for me, I got to a situation where we were told my son was not going to live. He was going to die. There's still no cure for his disease. And so we were given, I, as a single parent caregiver, worked with hospice, and we decided that it was time to remove Austin's nutrition and hydration, which is palliative sedation, because he was in so much pain that they couldn't keep him free from pain. So to your point, Eva, you walk through these and you go through this situation. And I also have a daughter, and that has its whole other life journey. So, you know, to everyone that's listening, I would say this: whatever you're going through, know that you can make meaning out of this if you choose. And much of that is, to Scarlett's point, a choice. Grace comes, you know, Dorothy and Christine, everybody, it's that did I do the best I could at that time with the information that I had? And that's where grace is. And I don't mean grace in the religious sense. I mean grace as in acceptance of oneself, that we are perfectly imperfect, all of us. And very few people wake up and say, I can't wait to totally mess up this day for myself and everyone around me. We don't. Try to paddle through. So did I do the best I could at that time with the information that I had?
I love that. I think through the darkest hours of my life, I've really tried to simplify things to one thought, and not and sort of in a muscular way, try very hard to not overwhelm myself. I like this thought, just do the next right thing. Sometimes when I can barely, move through it all, I just try to do the next right thing. And I'm curious for each of you, Dorothy, we're all looking at our lives and telling this narrative on behalf of other people. When you think about certain tricks that you've used in your life to stay positive, or thoughts or mottos or just skills, what lesson could you teach somebody? Or what would you give? What would you, if we could all give it all away, all of our joy, our suffering, all of it for others, what would your lesson be that you would impart on everybody today, or anybody that you talk to? You're muted. Still muted. There you go.
Got it. Oh my gosh, Zoom. I think one of the best lessons that I have learned through so many periods of loss that I've had, but certainly through my sister, is to really count it all joy. I was producing a project once with the incomparable Miss Ruby D, and she had just lost her husband, Ozzie Davis, and we were having this conversation where she was telling me, they had such a love affair their entire life of acting together and also doing so much like social and racial justice work. And I really was talking with her about like, how do you, Christine, exactly what you said, like, how do you go on when you have lost your best friend, your everything, your center, your core? And she said to me, Dorothy, you count it all joy. And I didn't understand that at the time. It was years before my sister died. And then when we died, I was like, oh, you count it all joy. So I think you count every moment that you have and you make it count. And Liz, to your point, you don't think beyond it, like be in the now, process everything in the now. Don't think about what needs to happen tomorrow. Where do you need to be? What's happening in an hour? Really count every moment that you have joy, because a collection of those moments are what make up our memories, and those memories sustain us when the impossible happens. So I would say count it all joy.
Philosophically, I always think, maybe because my mom died young and therefore I feel the value of life to be fleeting and so forth, what you're saying. I like this idea. It helps me. It's a skill that I dip into. Eva, I'm curious what your thoughts on it, that everything is temporary. You can really make it through. Now there's this long, like grieving process that stays with us forever. And like Eva said, it pops up if you've lost your husband or your child or your parent or what have you. I mean, this is going to stay with you like Elisabeth Kubler-Ross forever, but it changes us indelibly, and it changes us for forever and for good, for how we react to it and how we survive it. But the temporary thought that life is not forever, and that this moment isn't forever, joy is not forever, so eat it up, and pain is not going to be there, that acute pain forever. Like Christine said, it comes and it goes, and in that wave, how do you feel about the thought that all of this is ultimately entirely temporary?
I feel like I can't even wrap my head around that. I know that as a concept, and I think as humans, we know that as a concept, but I don't know that we really, I I don't know that we can really jump in to that. I can't really jump into that. But what I think what has really changed my life, and made it all slightly more palatable, is choosing every morning to, I mean, we always hear about gratitude, have an attitude of gratitude, burp, burp, burp. And that's like so chipper, and so it sounds so easy, but it's really, when you're in the thick of it and you're barely getting out of bed every day, it can be very, very hard to find gratitude for anything. And like, you know, you were saying about, you know, we all love the butterfly, but we forget that what happens in that chrysalis is that the caterpillar actually turns to complete soup. He's soup in there. He becomes, he's not even a thing. He's just a soup, and then he becomes a butterfly. And we forget that we have to be soup. And in that soup, as we start to put together one by one the atoms of who we're going to now be, based on the new knowledge of grief that now informs our every cell, we have to choose daily the beauty of that butterfly, of putting that butterfly together atom by atom. And I find that I have to do it first thing in the morning, because if I try to stop the freight train of negative thoughts midday, I lost it already. So I have to wake up in the morning and really start to, with the small blessings, even if I'm having a bad day, it's got to be, these pillows I'm so grateful for, and I'm so cozy. You know what I mean? If that's all I got, that's all I got that day. But, and then I try to build on that, and I swear that has turned into a practice that has it's saved my sanity. It's saved my relationship with my daughter. That's when I was able to start to see that this is for me, because, you know, it's very easy to say it's not happening to me, it's happening for me, but you might not see the happening for me for a year.
Right.
You may not see all the consequences of that for months and months to a year, and then you're sitting in that patient holding pattern, which is so hard, because you're wondering if you're ever going to see any glimpse. But we have to build our own light every day, and that is a real practice that I didn't realize how powerful that was going to be for me in my healing, that I was going to be my own active participant, that it was very, very important that every morning I wake up and lay there for 5 minutes and say, I'm so grateful that my daughter's alive, that it wasn't my daughter. I'm so grateful that, you know, that the dogs didn't pee all over the back room this morning. I am so grateful that, you know what I mean? Like, I'm so grateful for whatever it is. And then it becomes bigger things. And then you find that you're actually feeling more joyous during the day. You're actually feeling really grateful for things all during the day that I wasn't even aware that I was grateful for. And then magic actually starts to happen. Have you guys, I'm sure you guys have all found that, because you're all beautiful women living heart forward, you know, and once you start to do that, you start to really see the miracles that happen all day, every day, that we've been so oblivious to, because we're, you know, we're blinded by all of the grief and the things and the work and the process. But I started to find that I came into the flow of that gratitude, and I came into the flow of all those incredible things just kind of magically happening, and starting to soothe over the pain and the grief. Because I feel like when I start a day off bad, and I'm already in a rush, and I'm already frustrated, I'm already angry, and everything's already bothering me, that's exactly when you drop the mascara wand all down the front of yourself, and now you really are, you know, you're really waylaid. And I did that one day, and I know it sounds silly or funny, but in that moment I thought to myself, this is the universe telling me, just slow down, because now you have mascara all down the front of yourself, because you were in a pissed off hurry. And this was just like, because now you have to slow down, because you now have to change your clothes. So, and wipe it all off your face.
But that's
And
exactly what we're talking about is, you know,
slow down.
that these, and also these skills, you know, these are tools and they get exercised before things happen to us, during things happening to us, and after. We continue to practice that childlike enthusiasm for what we do have. You know, you are a glass half full person. I think that everybody here is, but you've worked at it. And to give that gift back to other people, Christine, what would you say, what lesson would you impart that you've really turned to time and again? The simplest things, like you said, like with your husband, Richard, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff anyway. But, you know, what is your daily practice that you lean into? Like Eva was saying, you know, just if you've got nothing else, like I have this childlike enthusiasm for what I do have, you know?
Well, I mean, to Eva's point, don't sweat the small stuff. The book was written 25 years ago. We're having our 25th anniversary. And I think Richard was one of the very first kind of a pioneer in positive psychology before positive psychology was a thing. And one of our favorite chapters, and something we always talked about in every subsequent book, was how you start your day is how you live your day. And so when you do start your day with gratitude, and that sense of, I mean, well, first of all, like gratitude, when you tune into gratitude in your heart, it's a feeling of joy no matter what's going on in your life. So you literally bring a point of joy into your existence when you just tune into a moment of gratitude. And it can be something as simple as just breathing. And like Dianne talked about, you know, nobody is grateful for loss. Nobody says, oh, whoopee, we are going to have, you know, we're going to have a grief party here. You know, that is just not what we do as human beings. We're not wired that way. And I do believe that it's after a time period when you look back, it's like what Stephen Jobs said, we can connect the dots of life. As we look back on life, it's not in the moment often that we can see how this is shaping our lives for the better. But there is this point at which you absolutely must choose to step into it and step into what this is, and realize, you know, you can't change the circumstances of where you're at, but you can step in and move forward with life. And like, I just feel like we vacillate back and forth between, you know, feelings of self-pity and feelings of, I can do this, you know, that's the way our minds work, you know, and yet, living very presently and being in the moment is so powerful. And you're not, you know, in your fear, and you're not past regret, or in your past. When you're in the present moment, you can feel what you're feeling and move through those feelings in a lot easier way, I think, than if we don't do that. So, you know, that I have to say that my training with our background with the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books and the psychology that we spent our lifetimes studying together, my husband and I, really helped me a lot, but it didn't prepare me, you know, it didn't prepare me for going through loss at all. And yet, I'd say that it helped me with my resilience. You know, it helped me to think about, you know, I was sort of fortunate and unfortunate in the sense of I had to decide, am I going to carry on the legacy of my husband? And, you know, kind of step into his world, step into his shoes, so to speak. He had size 15 feet, so they were kind of big, but, but, you know, I was like, okay, you know, it wasn't like I just decided immediately. It took me a couple of years of really getting on my feet. And I was like a deer in the headlights most of the time. And it wasn't like I just suddenly became this strong woman. I was strong, but I was also going through loss and grief. And that's a fragile time, very fragile. So, but I think that the gratitude piece, I love, Eva, really helped me too. And it helped me to realize that I had been given this amazing life. And the way to go back to an amazing life was not to wallow in suffering. As you know, I just knew from the moment that it happened, I wasn't going to be a person that could live my life with grief forever. And I don't think that we necessarily grieve forever. I think that grief has a time period. And certainly if you lose a child, I could see myself grieving forever if I lost a child. Losing Richard, I felt like I've learned how to continue that relationship. And it's a lot more one-sided. He gets me everything I want for my birthday every single time. Never misses on that. It sometimes feels like a very one-sided conversation, but then on the other hand, I was married to him 25 years. I know exactly what he would say, so yeah, so it's been a beautiful part of my journey, and I embrace it fully now, in the sense of I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it weren't for the loss I went through.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be the woman I am today if I didn't have people, women like you surrounding me with your stories and your narratives. And I just want to turn to Dianne for 1 second, because I think we're talking about gratitude, but also compassion and empathy is something I want to, before we jump off, just, talk about, because like you said, Dianne, everybody is going through their own journey. And, at the Respect Project, we talk about self-respect. And self-respect hinges on, for me, mutual respect. And so really understanding that everybody is sort of moving, like you said, Eva, to tie it all in together, like these butterflies sort of in their soup going through it. And I really appreciate so much when people tell me the truth of their soup, because that to me is sustenance. We're talking about what sustains you, what keeps you positive, what are these skills, what lessons could you give each other, who are your heroes and teachers? Let's go out into the world, Dianne, just to talk a little bit more about that and be each other's teachers and guides, because everybody is going through something that's uniquely their own. So Dianne, I just wanted to come back to you before we get into the questions and answer everybody's questions about our talk today.
Sure. I think it's safe to assume right now that every single person is going through something that we have no idea is going on. Everyone. I mean, so as someone who works in the grief space, and I also work with a lot of people that are in the public view, it always saddens me when there's this perception that they know everything that's going on, and that everything, because they're accessible and authentic, but even still, we all hold something back. And one of the things that we hold back is that even though so much of these transitions, the loss of a husband, the loss of a child, the loss of a sister, the loss of multiple family members, even though all of that happens, we most often don't say, I also lost myself. Because of all of these changes, I lost who I was. And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that our sense of innocence and joie de vivre, and even if I know some people, I did this piece on fashion recently, that I had somebody walk in my house, and as a single person, he walks in and he says, do you know that your closet is filled with black and gray and brown and taupe? And I said, oh my gosh, I never looked at it that way. I had become this person. And I remember I used to love florals and color and all of that. But that part of me died when my son suffered so much. It's been work for me to get back to, even though I'm in the space and working with some fascinating people who struggle. I think it's also important to mourn ourselves and who we were once upon a time, and to give space and breath to that, and to honor that part of me died. That part of me is gone. That part of me will not be wholly and fully and completely that woman or man again. Yet through this, there is this thing called post-traumatic growth. If I could just sum it up with this, please Google post-traumatic growth. It's a thing. It's based on science and research. And what it means is that it is available to all of us. If we employ and apply the work of resiliency, the work of looking with gratitude and grace and compassion, not just out here, but toward ourselves, we can grow. We can use the things that happen to us for us as a springboard. Have you ever bounced on a bed and you jump on one part of the bed and it goes and you sink in it? That's the grief, and then you can bounce on another part and you kind of go boing boing. That's the post-traumatic growth. That's where we go, all this stuff happened. Not only, yes, I miss the part of me that used to laugh more easily, but now I laugh more loudly. And I do it with less shame, and I do it with less reservation. I do it with a boisterous feeling in my gut. I'll give a damn who says, what is she laughing about? Because I know.
But you know what?
I know what I've gone through, and I know what you guys have gone through in your part. We know collectively what we're going through. Does that make sense?
It does. And Diane, that's really what you do. And again, I want to just sort of encourage everybody who's here with us, who listens to this later afterwards, who goes and sees the movie Don't Sweat the Small Stuff on October 16th. You have not suffered for naught. You've gone through what you've gone through in order to be beacons of light for each other. And I encourage you to tell your narrative on behalf of other people, because you will help them be stronger. You will help them have more resilience. Diane, you're doing that every day when you help somebody cross over, or you help them go through their grief. Just Scarlett, really quickly, because I know I promised you guys this is 1 hour. I just wanted to say that somebody here has acknowledged that you wrote your book during the first 6 months of, losing Jesse. And they just wanted to know, how has your grief evolved over time? And so if you could just sort of share about that. And then I just want to acknowledge everybody that's here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, for that. Natasha is actually my co-writer for my book, Nurturing Healing Love, and I love to see you on here. Thank you. I think it was really helpful for me to realize that the place in your brain where you process pain is the same as where you process joy. So in other words, you have to face and really delve into your pain in order to experience and delve into joy. And I made the choice, and I love, Dorothy, you mentioned this. I think everyone mentioned choice. I made the choice early on that the man who murdered Jesse did not murder me, and I was a model for my older son, who was 12 years old at the time. I realized the way that I handle this is going to be the way that he handles difficulty, pain, suffering, tragedy, loss for the rest of his life. And that realization really helped me rise to the occasion and put my best foot forward, understanding that I want to feel joy. Jesse would want me to feel joy. So I have to have the courage to look into this pain so that I can experience joy. And Natasha knows, because she was there with me through this, that I realized there are two kinds of people. Like, we were fortunate in Sandy Hook where there's so many people that came in and offered their services, and they were crazy services of trauma relief, things that nobody else had ever heard of. I was like, everything can help. And there were a lot of people that said, ooh, but wait a minute, I've never heard of that. Is it evidence-based? What, I know it worked for you, but what if it doesn't work for me? There was a lot of fear around it. And as Diane knows, because we've talked about this ad nauseum, there's so much fear around grief. And I think that if we could overcome our fear in a way and be able to face our pain with the understanding that how we do that will usher in joy, just like in that kids movie Inside Out. I had to Google it really quickly, where Joy, who doesn't want pain, she doesn't want any pain, get out of here, pain, go, we hate you, go. And then all of a sudden everything turns gray, so she finds herself on a journey trying to find pain. Wait a second, I didn't realize that we needed you too, to have that gratitude, to realize wow, we do have some incredible things in our lives, and to make our lives the best that they can be.
I love you, Scarlett. I love you so much. That encapsulates so much of why I wanted to have this talk today, because although you all have been through a lot, which, you know, most people have been through a lot, you are living fully, you are living with joy, you're living with leadership, you're successful, you're kind, you're thriving, you're all just extraordinary people, and you're actively, muscularly heading towards joy, you know, every single day. So before we wrap it up, I hope those who are with us today, you will join us again for our next Respect Project talk this Sunday. I'll share more of that with you. You guys, Dianne, Eva, Dorothy, Christine, Scarlett, do you have anything else you want to add before we say goodbye to everybody? And thank you for your time on this beautiful Monday morning.
Just thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the best therapy session for me ever. It's wonderful to be able to have community with people that have experienced some realm of what you've experienced. So Liz, thank you for loving me enough to have me be a part of this. I've learned so much. Dianne, Eva, Scarlett, Christine, you are just warrior women. I'm so glad to have met you today.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
I am so
This was
grateful
beautiful.
for all of you and all of your beautiful words, and I'm piecing them all together in my head. I'm going to go journal when I get off. Thank you so much for doing this, Liz. Like, you're the most beautiful person inside and out that I've ever been like blessed to befriend. So thank you, honey.
I love you guys. You're all my friends. And Christine, congratulations. I hope you guys will go watch Don't Sweat the Small Stuff on Lifetime on October 16th and celebrate the journey of this beautiful spirit, Kristine Carlson, Dianne Gray, Scarlett Lewis. I love you. Lifetime, thank you for being the sponsor of the talk today for the Respect Project, and just keep calm and carry on, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
ladies. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.